The Stonewall Riots, the spark that ignited the gay rights movement. There is no single consensus definition of a social movement, but they are generally classified as a type of group action that focuses on specific political or social issues to make change. In this case, the social movement is for equal rights for the LGBTQ2S+ community. The fight for gay rights began as early as 1924, but the gay liberation movement really caught fire towards the end of the 60s. The radicalism that had emerged is often attributed to the Stonewall Riots of 1969, when a group of gay men, lesbians, drag queens, and transgender women at a bar in New York City resisted a police raid that was intended to criminalize LGBTQ2S+ people for simply being themselves. The raid was one of many. The riot wasn't planned, but happened spontaneously after LGBTQ2S people had had enough and stood up for themselves. The Stonewall Riots were a trans and Black-led revolution, and here's why. The police entered the Stonewall Inn, arresting LGBTQ2S+ individuals for dressing like the opposite sex. As people fled to the street and officers began to escort people into paddy wagons to be transported to jail, the crowds began to grow and protest the arrests. The situation escalated quickly when two transgender women of color, Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, resisted arrest and threw objects at the officers. They stood up to police brutality and continued for years to spread awareness and advocate for equal rights for the LGBTQ2S+ community. These two women were the leaders of the riot that lit the match that really ignited the gay liberation movement. The focus of the gay liberation movement at its roots is just equality, to no longer be persecuted for their sexuality or gender identities, for marriage equality, for protection against discrimination in the workplace. Simply put, LGBTQ2S+ people have been fighting for years to just live in peace. In 1924, Henry Gerber, a German immigrant, founded the Society for Human Rights, the first documented gay rights organization in the United States. During World War II, the Nazis held homosexual men in concentration camps, branding them with the pink triangle badge, which was also given to sexual predators. In 1948, in his book Sexual Behavior in the Human Male, Alfred Kinsey proposed that male sexual orientation is on a continuum between exclusively homosexual to exclusively heterosexual, a theory now known as the Kinsey scale. In 1950, Harry Hay founded the Mattachine Foundation, one of the nation's first gay rights group. The Los Angeles organization coined the term homophile, which was considered less clinical and focused on sexual activity than homosexual. In 1952, the American Psychiatric Association listed homosexuality as a mental disorder. The following year, an executive order was signed that banned gay people, or more specifically, people guilty of sexual perversion, from federal jobs, which would remain in effect for about 20 years. In 1961, Illinois became the first state to remove its anti-sodomy laws, resulting in the decriminalizing of homosexuality, and the first documentary about homosexuality called The Rejected was aired. In 1966, members of the Mattachine Society in New York City staged a sip-in, a twist on the sit-in protests of the 1960s, in which they visited taverns, declared themselves gay, and waited to be turned away so they could sue. They were denied service at the Greenwich Village Tavern Julius, resulting in much publicity and the quick reversal of the anti-gay liquor laws. On June 28, 1969, New York City police raided the Stonewall Inn. Fed up with years of police harassment, patrons and neighborhood residents began throwing objects at police as they loaded the arrested into police vans. The scene eventually exploded into a full-blown riot with subsequent protests that lasted for 5 more days. In 1970, at the one-year anniversary of the Stonewall Riots, New York City community members marched through local streets in commemoration. The march is now considered the country's first gay pride parade. Activists also took back the pink triangle and turned it into a symbol of gay pride. In 1978, Harvey Milk became the first openly gay man elected to a political office in California. Milk asked Gilbert Baker, an artist and gay rights activist, to create an emblem that represents the movement and would be seen as a symbol of pride. Baker designed and stitched together the first rainbow flag. The outbreak of AIDS in the United States dominated the struggle for gay rights in the 1980s and 1990s. In 1981, the CDC published a report about 5 previously healthy homosexual men becoming infected with a rare type of pneumonia. By 1984, researchers had identified the cause of AIDS. the human immunodeficiency virus, or HIV, and the FDA licensed the first commercial blood test for HIV in 1985. In 1992, Bill Clinton, during his campaign to become president, promised that he would lift the ban against gays in the military. But after failing to garner enough support for such an open policy, President Clinton in 1993 passed the Don't Ask, Don't Tell policy, which allowed gay men and women to serve in the military as long as they kept their sexuality a secret, which did little to stop people from being discharged on the grounds of their sexuality. Massachusetts was the first state to legalize gay marriage, and the first legal same-sex marriage was performed on May 17, 2004, a day when 77 other couples across the state also tied the knot. Gay marriage was finally ruled legal by the Supreme Court in June 2015. Jim Obergefell, who sued because he was unable to put his name on his late husband's death certificate, argued that the laws violated the Equal Protection Clause and Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. Conservative Justice Anthony Kennedy sided with Justices Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Stephen Breyer, Sonia Sotomayor, and Elena Kagan in favor of same-sex marriage rights, ultimately making gay marriage legal across the nation on June 2015. The ruling read, in part, "No union is more profound than marriage, for it embodies the highest ideals of love, fidelity, devotion, sacrifice, and family. In forming a marital union, two people become something greater than they once were. As some of the petitioners in these cases demonstrate, marriage embodies a love that may endure even past death. It would misunderstand these men and women to say they disrespect the idea of marriage. Their plea is that they do respect it so deeply that they seek to find its fulfillment for themselves. Their hope is not to be condemned to live in loneliness, excluded from one of civilization's oldest institutions. They ask for equal dignity in the eyes of the law. The Constitution grants them that right." Since the legalization of gay marriage, the fight for equal rights has continued. It seems that progress seems to move both forward and backward on a year-to-year basis. On the right, we see a picture of the pride flag being raised on Parliament Hill for the first time in 2016 with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. On the contrary, in Donald Trump's first year as President of the United States alone, he managed to roll back a lot of the progress made for LGBTQ2S+ people. In the 4 years Donald Trump was president, some of the things he did that affected LGBTQ2S+ people are in these headlines, which includes cuts to funding, rollbacks in healthcare, redefining gender, and enabling discrimination. Where we are now in terms of LGBTQ2S+ rights? Well, we've seen some progress and some pushback. Nearly 100 years of fighting for rights, and the fight still isn't over. I'm not sure it ever will be, but I do know that the LGBTQ2S+ community is resilient and won't give up fighting. Harvey Milk once said, "Burst down those closet doors once and for all and stand up and start to fight. The closet doors have long since fallen off of their hinges, but the fight continues. It is up to allies to stand together with the LGBTQ2S+ community because we're stronger together."